the brief snapshot of all the reporting elements. This is probably an oversimplified chart here, but gives a good sense of the sort of main pieces of information that we have to report to U.S. Department of Treasury, and how we are collecting that information from our state agency partners. So first is the project data. So if there is basically each SFRF allotment to agencies that has a unique MOU with NC Pro is considered a project. And so at that overall level, there's basic information that we need from all projects. And then there's some additional information, supplemental information that we need depending on the U.S. Expenditure, or the U.S. Treasury expenditure category and subcategory. Treasury asks for some unique bits of information. And then basically anytime your agency is committing or making payments to entities outside of your agency, that needs to be accounted for in some way. If those commitments are less than $50,000, it just gets pulled together as an aggregate report of that information each month. If there are entities that will receive $50,000 or more through your SFRF project, that information about that subrecipient and the subaward and related expenditures needs to be reported in greater detail on a monthly basis. So we'll cover that as well. And then finally, there are performance measures. There's performance reporting that's required for SFRF. For this first year of performance reporting, we're going to start that at the end of September, rather than what will moving forward be mid-July reporting date. This is because NC Pro has an annual performance report due to U.S. Treasury at the end of July each year. So a few notes about this initial reporting period. The first is that this first report that you submit will be effectively a catch-up report. So if you have really any activities that occurred prior to July 1st, so really anything in FY22, that would need to be reported here if you haven't already reported it to NC Pro. So that I would expect is mostly just going to be anything that occurred in April, May, and June. If you had any obligations or expenditures that were earlier than that period, just let us know so we know how to expect that. But I think we've largely already accounted for any first quarter activities in the first quarter report that we submitted to Treasury. So really, but anyway, the long story short here is this is a catch-up report. And then moving forward, starting in August, it'll be a monthly report as planned. Second, Pangram is open for reporting now. We will be sending out a notice a little bit later today, early this afternoon, with some directions about it. Most of the updates that we were waiting to be programmed into Pangram have been completed. That includes all of the project level data. There is an update that we are waiting for related to the expense types, and I can talk about that a little bit more, but that'll be covered in the email that goes out a little bit later today. The short version is that the expense types that are listed in the reporting handbook have not been completely updated in Pangram yet. So we are offering that update should be completed in the next, if not end of today. It sounds like it should be done really in the next 24 hours or so. So if you all, if your agency really needs to upload everything into Pangram today or tomorrow, we will, there's a little bit of a workaround that we can provide, so you can enter in all the information that we need to submit to U.S. Treasury. This update is happening because of a little bit of a difference that occurred with what Treasury is requiring. But if for those of you who are at this point just organizing your information and plan to submit later in the week, I would expect that everything would be as described in the reporting handbook. James, you can, if you add your email into the chat, we'll make sure that you're on the email. We've largely relied on our grants managers to provide information out to their main point of contacts for each of the SFRF projects. And then finally, I noted, yeah, so Jane, what is currently listed in the, I think in Pangram right now, it's called accounting type or expenditure category. That's what's going to be updated so that what's currently listed in there is not accurate to what long-term we will be reporting or having be reported in Pangram. So the directions that we'll provide in short order here will clarify if you are planning to submit a report today or tomorrow and the changes have not gone live in Pangram yet. We'll note which of those categories to use, which of the old Pangram categories to use in order to align with what the reporting needs to be moving forward. So I apologize for that that delay there, and hopefully we'll make things as clear as possible. And we can we'll cover that during this time. And I already mentioned the annual performance report timeline here. So the suggested steps, obviously we are in reporting week. So if you haven't gotten started on this, I will say just because some things are still being updated in Pangram doesn't mean you shouldn't be starting the reporting process. Pangram is really the last step in the process. So I'd recommend that you get the subword data organized in the subword reporting template. You can certainly review what project level data is going to be required to be submitted into Pangram. That is all outlined in detail in the reporting handbook. And then that last step would be then to actually go into Pangram and start your expense report for this period. So definitely a lot to do before you actually submit. So this is what Pangram is it looks like now. So all this is live. You see agreement project status, all this stuff is in there currently. This is a screen grab for the revenue replacement category. What still needs to be updated is up at the top here, you see accounting category, and there's a drop down. The items in that drop down are what still need to be updated. So there are some that are very similar to what we'll ultimately be reporting on. However, because of changes to what U.S. Treasury is requiring and the level of detail that they're requiring, particularly for identifying personnel costs, that's why we had recently had to sort of shift gears and get some updates loaded in there, and that's just the last piece we're waiting on. So for now, I'll come back to what those changes are and how to handle that if you're reporting today or tomorrow. But again, unless you really need to submit your report today or tomorrow, I think probably the best course of action would be to go ahead and log back in tomorrow and see if the changes are in there. Again, we'll communicate with you all throughout this process. So I will pause there and answer any questions that you may have that we haven't addressed previously, and help troubleshoot challenges or just open up discussion on any reporting related items.
Hi, Andy, it's Jane again.
Hey, Jane.
I was wondering if, just wanted to clarify if we will be uploading a separate subaward spreadsheet for each project, or if we'll be putting all project subaward information on one spreadsheet attachment.
Great question. Thanks for clarifying that. So it will be one subaward attachment for each project. And that's because when you report into Pangram, it's one project at a time. So we want to make sure that the data doesn't get confused across multiple projects, particularly for partner agencies like DHHS, which has a lot of projects. We want to keep all the data in order. So yeah, it's one. It'll be project. All the reporting is project by project, and that would include any subawards associated with that specific project.
Hi, Andy. This is Greer Arthur at UNC Chapel Hill. So for the subaward attachment template, so we have subrecipients. So we got multiple subrecipients, but within each subrecipient institution, we have principal investigators for multiple like research projects. When we're reporting on a subrecipient or a subaward, can we separate them out by individual project led by a separate investigator, or do we need to compile all the projects into a single subaward line?
It would be each individual. Let me pull up the template just to reference as we walk through this. So you would report. So remind me how many projects are you all funding right now?
So we have 2 MOUs, and there will be many projects distributed to different like university campuses. We haven't quantified them yet, but yeah, my question, is how do we need a separate subaward line, because we're going to be distributing funding agreements for every single investigator, but that means that one subrecipient institution will receive multiple funding agreements. So do we consolidate them? Yeah.
So you would, it's a really interesting question. So you would say you have 3 institutions. Among those institutions, there are 12 unique research projects, and you have unique MOUs for each of those projects. You would report those 3 institutions as subrecipients. And then on the subrecipients tab, and this is assuming that they're all going to receive $50,000 or more, but you would identify the subrecipients. On the subawards tab, you'd be able to create multiple subawards, even if those multiple subawards are with one subrecipient. So you would do that by identifying the subrecipient UEI, and then assigning unique subaward numbers for the various subawards. And then you would track the expenditures by the unique subawards from there. So it should be, if they are unique agreements that you all have for unique projects, even if it is associated with the same subrecipient entity, if they're unique projects, it should be reported individually, not in aggregate. Unless it's less than $50,000 and then everything is reported in aggregate.
That's really clear. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has changed with the aquarium, so I know I'm coming in real late on this because I didn't get any of the information pretty much till last Thursday or Friday. So I know I'm coming out asking a question that may have already been answered or just don't understand what I was dealing with here. But right now, we'll say for the aquariums, I'm looking at having 12 different projects, which each of those projects is going to obviously have several contracts associated with each, at least 2, probably 3 or 4. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand how we're quantifying that. So do I want to try to keep each of those projects separate, or is it going to be all one big reporting and then just list each of those contracts underneath of that? I know some of those contracts would obviously be less than 50, but most of them are probably going to be over 50. So I'm just trying to get a rough idea of what direction I need to be looking at.
Yeah, good question. So for and just to clarify too, so are you with the are you acting as DNCR, or is DNCR providing funding to you all to then further subgrant out?
I think I'm getting it through DNCR. Like I did get my request in for Pangram access, but that was obviously last Friday. So I haven't gotten actual access yet. So I don't know who all I need to be in contact with yet. So
Okay.
I think it's coming through the department, or I know it's coming through the department. I'm just not sure how it's coming through them yet.
Okay.
I don't know the questions to ask to find out. So
yeah, and we can the NC Pro team can follow up just to make sure that it's clear exactly how the specific funding is working for you all. So let's suppose just to walk through this that you all are considered basically part of DNCR as a administering agency, as an entity that would be responsible for reporting all this to NC Pro. So you all would report the any subawards that you all are committing to any other entities. So that could be a traditional subgrant to another entity to carry out a specific purpose. If you're contracting with someone providing goods or services, that would qualify as well as needing reporting. And then even if you're giving just financial assistance to another entity that isn't specific to any outcomes other than they were impacted by the pandemic and they need financial help, that would all need to be reported. The threshold for that is $50,000. So anything that you'd be any entity to whom you're committing $50,000 or more would need to be reported in this subaward reporting template, and so you would enter just who that entity is. So you'd identify the entity on the subrecipient tab, and then you would provide the actual information related to that subaward. So what's the nature of the funding that you're committing to them? Is it just is it a contract? Is it a grant where you're just providing funds up front for that entity to carry out some purpose, and so on? You'd identify the amount that's being obligated to them, and then the date that you're awarding it, and then there's some questions related to the sector, and all this is information that we're pulling directly from what we have to submit to U.S. Treasury. Then tab 6, any payments that you make to that entity. So you've obligated $50,000. You haven't paid them yet. Whenever you actually start paying on that obligation is when you'd start reporting here. And that would all align. Now, if the entity is receiving $50,000, or you have multiple entities receiving that will receive less than $50,000, that gets reported in aggregate on the aggregate subawards page. And then finally, if there are any entities that are sole proprietorships or individuals to whom you will be committing money or making payments, that gets reported in aggregate always, regardless of the amount that's being committed to them. Anyone that's considered an individual, again, including sole proprietorships, gets reported in the payments to individuals tab. Is that helpful? I'm not sure if I actually answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. I'm part of that question. What I might add, say if my contract is 100,000, but I'm only making a payment for 30,000 at the time, then that goes in. Does that go for the aggregate, or I mean the contract's obviously the over 100, I mean over the 50,000, but the payment was going to be under 50.
Right. Yeah, good question. So that once you enter that contract for $100,000, you would need to report that you are committing that money to another entity, that you've obligated those funds. So you would identify that entity that will receive $100,000 in the subrecipients tab. You would provide information about that $100,000 in the subaward tab. If you haven't made any payments yet, then you wouldn't have anything to report on the expenditures tab. If you have only made a payment of $30,000, you'd still report that on the expenditures tab. That $50,000 threshold is associated really with what's being committed to the entity rather than what has actually been paid out at that point.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that now, so I appreciate it.
Yep.
This is Susan Forbes, DNCR State Library. We have been told that the libraries that will be getting funds from us can be considered beneficiaries and not subrecipients. But it sounds like for the purposes of reporting, if they receive over $50,000, then we need to list them separately in this reporting as a subrecipient. So I think we're just getting a little confused and having a little bit of uncertainty as to whether or not there is something about that $50,000 mark that will in actuality make them a subrecipient and subject to uniform guidance and some reporting requirements.
So
additional.
Yeah, and this has been an ongoing challenge, I think, because some of the language that U.S. Treasury has adopted to describe the various requirements specific to reporting, the language very often overlaps with language that means very specific things under uniform guidance and the like. So for the purposes of reporting, a subrecipient is a blanket term. It doesn't mean subrecipient specific to the purposes of uniform guidance. For reporting, a subrecipient is any entity to whom you are committing funding or paying funding. So from that standpoint, we need to tell U.S. Treasury, regardless of how we are categorizing the entity as being a beneficiary, which again, beneficiaries are not subject to monitoring. All of that is still true. But for reporting purposes, we still need to know, because U.S. Treasury is asking, how much money did you commit to that entity and how much have you paid them? They don't need to know anything else after that. But they just need to know, have you all committed funds and have you made payments on those commitments? And that's sort of the limit there.
Will they need to report anything to us once we disperse the funds?
That would be for you all to determine with them, but for monitoring purposes and for our reporting requirements to U.S. Treasury, no.
But we might need to get some information from them for these annual performance reporting. You
may, and that's where I think that the answer, everyone's favorite answer is it depends. I think we'll need to, so as we approach that September 30th mark for the annual performance report, between now and then, we're going to try to sit down with each agency to talk through the projects and make sure that what we develop for what is to be reported on an annual basis, that it really makes sense and provides meaningful information that will actually, that we being this, not necessarily just NC Pro, but like the state as a whole will be able to use moving forward. So maybe like it may be helpful to know if an entity that you just are providing financial assistance to, did they just use that to backfill past payments related to mitigating the spread of COVID-19, or are they trying to use the money to, I think there are any number of things that would be like interesting to know and helpful to know from a program evaluation kind of lens, to understand the impact of the programs, but not necessarily that would sort of be beyond the scope of what is required for monitoring or federal reporting purposes.
Okay.
I had a question about capital expenditures on the core project data. Questions. I know there's a few capital expenditure questions, and I was wondering if that applies. The question, does the project include capital expenditures? Does that only apply if we as an administering agency are using funds for capital expenditures, or does it also apply to subrecipients that may be using funds for capital expenditures?
That is a good question. I do not know the answer off the top of my head. I don't know, Mikey or Natalie, if you've found something specific to that. Otherwise, we can we'll follow up with you. We're just as a note to everyone, we're tracking the questions that are being asked during these sessions, and we're going to post sort of a updated FAQ on the website as we provide answers on some of those items. So we may need to follow up with you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. I see, Steve, you asked the question in the chat that I have not addressed. So, confirming that reports don't need to be submitted for projects that have not received any drawdowns. That is correct for this month. Since we're just in this first reporting period as a catch up on previous activities, if you do not need to submit a report for projects for which you have not received funds. Starting in August, we will need to have reports for every project, even if there have been no activities on those projects. But for this month, the reporting is really only going to be for projects that have had activities, just so we help narrow the scope of what everyone has to do in short order here. And since this is the first go around for everyone on this reporting structure, it'll just be narrowed to projects that have actually had obligations or expenditures to report. I just want to put up on this screen here the expense types directions that I mentioned earlier. So this will come out via email. And again, this is on the project data reporting page, and this is the expense report. So when you go into Pangram, you say create expense report. This is what'll show up. So the accounting category drop-downs is what we are still waiting to be finalized in the programming. What is currently in there versus what the new categories will be is up at the top of this screen. You can see old categories, that is what is currently in Pangram. And what the new categories are is what will be in Pangram. Again, hopefully today, likely tomorrow. If you absolutely need to submit your report today or before that update has been finalized, here are the directions for you. So we're providing what the new expense type is in the left here on the table toward the bottom of the screen. And then in order to report that information, we have the action you should take. So really anything related to personnel costs, whether that's grant administration personnel or grant program execution personnel, that information should be reported in the comment box on the page. You'll see below all that programmatic reporting data is an open-ended comment box where you can just provide information about the report you're submitting. That's where you should identify your personnel costs. And then for everything else, grant administration, all other costs, you would use the general admin cost category. For program execution costs, all other costs, again, non-personnel, you'd use general program cost. Payments to subrecipients would be listed as subrecipients program cost, and payments to beneficiaries tracks exactly. You would not use the subrecipients admin cost for any purpose for this reporting. So again, this is as needed if you really need to submit today or tomorrow. This is sort of a workaround that we have in the meantime as we wait for this final update to the system. But otherwise, it should be done in short order. But we want to make sure that folks can start submitting their reports even as we're waiting for this last piece. So I just wanted to make sure I covered that as well. Any questions about that or any other reporting topics?
I have one other question. Sorry, I know I've talked a lot. This is more of a technical question related to Pangram, as we're just figuring out at DHHS how to streamline reporting as best as we can. And I was wondering if it's possible to allow agency users of Pangram to access just the reporting side without accessing the funds request side.
I will defer to my colleague Youngjin Lee to help with that question.
So my understanding your question is you don't want people to see or to create a payment request, but just allow them to do the reporting part. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, right now there's no differentiation. The rule you either only display just viewing all the things, or you can do payment request and the expense report. We rely on the staff their responsibility or what their role is. You can just let them know they can only file the expense report. They don't need to create payment request. But for the system, as long as they are able to get in the system, they are in the role to file the report, they can do the payment request theoretically. But all this will be reviewed by the approval process. There's a quality control for this purpose. But there's no differentiation in the system. Only allow people to do one things, not the other things.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If there's ever an opportunity to differentiate, like if other agencies express a a desire to have that kind of functionality, we would be on board with it. I just throwing that out there.
Okay, yeah, you are the first agency to ask a differentiate in this.
Okay.
See, Steve is seconding that request. They're going to be, floodgates are going to open now. We'll see. First, we need the expense types to update, and then we can get into varied permissions and all that. Any other reporting, or for that matter, Pangram questions?
I have a quick question. I don't know if you've already answered this. Apologies if you have. Is there any timeline on the annual performance report attachment template being released?
Yeah, so we are, so the short version is it's going to be very similar to the project planning template. There will be some updates to that based on some updates that U.S. Treasury provided for the corresponding federal report. What we want to do, however, is actually engage with each entity receiving funds and work through what, particularly on the performance measurement and sort of expected outcomes. What are the long term? How do we understand the impact of these funds, and how do we measure that? And that's going to be, because of the wide variety of uses of SFRF. It's going to be a little bit different for everyone, and we don't want to try to apply a one-size-fits-all kind of approach on that as a result. So we don't want to just create like extra work for you all, right? Like we want this to be information that is meaningful and ultimately actionable and informative for how the state handles the similar situations in the future. So the short version of all that is, I think once we get past this July reporting deadline, we will, and maybe even in sort of overlapping timeline, we're going to be reaching out to agencies and discussing that in greater detail. So I would expect that an actual template would come probably toward the end of August, but there shouldn't be any surprises on the template at that point. Like ideally we would have discussed all of that with you all. I would say that this first performance reporting period, because it's going to be based on activities for FY22, there haven't been a ton. So like I wouldn't expect that there are like a lot of outcomes to report at this point in most of the projects. So really the intent at this point is to set the stage for what is going to be meaningful information farther down the road, so a year from now. And so that's sort of the orientation, if that's helpful. So I don't want folks to think that you're on the hook for, myriad, performance metrics in the next month and a half here. We really want to use this time and opportunity to really map out what is most important about the projects, and work with you all, rely on your expertise to identify what are the appropriate expected outcomes and metrics that we can work with you all to track throughout the duration of these projects.
And that was really helpful, thank you. And you also mentioned that because we'll be working with you on the template, I think you said this in your email to me, we're going to be expecting to collect scientific progress reports from our research projects, but we will be expected to collect that and then select what we report to you as part of our performance measures, because I'm also trying to think about how quickly we can start collecting that information from our subrecipients.
Right. Yeah. I think again, I think we'll we can have a longer conversation about it. I think unique to the research work that UNC Collaboratory is doing. But yeah, I mean, it will be, we do not want to ask for things that are impossible to get or don't make sense to get. So if there are, among your projects or among your subawards, if there are certain things you think that would be in place to actually measure, 6 months from now, a year from now, great. If there are things that are really going to take longer to see the sort of results of that work, and that would make sense because this funding is, available for a while. That's fine. We just I think want to define for us, for NC Pro, as well as all the agencies, what to expect from all of that in terms of what data would be available and when, and how does that support the state's efforts to really understand the use and impact of the SFRF projects. Any other questions or comments?
I would like to add one thing, just to make sure all the expenses so far by end of June are reported in this first expense report. Yeah.
Andy,
Yeah, if you
we don't
need a help and assistance, contact the grant managers, and then they can schedule Teams meeting to help to file the expense report.
Hi, Andy, this is Lori from UNC Chapel Hill. If we don't have any expenses through June 30th, do we need to report that, or it's just kind of let that date pass by?
If you have any obligations or expenditures you need to report, if you have neither, it's possible that entities have made, have entered contracts, but haven't made payments on those contracts and thus don't have any expenditures. Those subawards, that obligation would need to be reported even if there aren't expenditures on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, as we approach the top of the hour here, NC Pro team will stick around for the next 10 minutes or so. If you've had your question answered or have no, there's no obligation to stick around for the rest of the time here. If you've had your items addressed, but just want to thank you all for joining. Again, we'll stick around for a bit, but just wanted to note, since it's slowing down a little bit, that it is totally fine if you need to or want to hop off. But like we said, we are around to answer questions till noon, and then we are certainly available via email and phone to help support you all through this first reporting week of SFRF, and want to try to get things set up well for the long term. And I appreciate everyone's patience throughout the process as we've rolled out this reporting system, reporting process. So thanks for engaging today. For those who don't don't have anything else, you can feel free to hop off, and everyone else will stick around and happy to keep answering questions for a while longer here.
Andy, this is Judy King with the System Office Community Colleges. One quick question. Will you guys be sending an email out when the pangram is ready, completely ready? I figured
Yes.
that, just wanted to verify.
Yeah, we absolutely will. So we'll send out an email today with some directions, like I just outlined, just mapping out if you need to report before it's 100% ready to go, like this is how to do it. And then we'll send out another notice when it's all 100% ready to go.
We are going to prefer to wait until you get it ready. I think that's
that works.
So yes, okay. Thank you so much for your help, and thank you for your email earlier today. That has been very helpful also.
Good, I'm glad. Appreciate all the engagement on this too. I think as we go through this, we want to make it an open space to continue to improve all of these systems as well. We're obviously going to be doing all this together for the next few years. So there will inevitably be some changes in the federal guidance on this, and that'll we'll want to work with you all on any adjustments you need to make. But for the most part, we're hopeful that we've put together a system that'll work and be clear. But really, the engagement from you all helps immensely as we continue to try to optimize this process. So thank you all for raising questions.
This is James again with the aquariums. Hopefully an easier, quick question on this one. On the expenditure tab for greater than 50,000, where it's got I guess column 602 and 603 for the dates. Is that the date for the contract potentially, or I guess for the subaward, or is that just the date for the month that expenditure was made in?
I'll pull this up so we can follow along. So this is on tab 6, right? You said 602 and 603.
Yep.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, that the expenditure start and end date is a little bit of a mystery to me still. Treasury hasn't provided, at least as far as I have been able to see, like a great explanation for the start and end on this. And Mikey or Natalie, jump in if you have more clarity on it than I do. But it is, so this would be the date that you send your check out, or the date that your entity would log a payment as being made or an expense being completed, would be the expenditure date. And it's fine if that's the same day. So you all send out a payment for $30,000 to the entity receiving $100,000. You send that out on June 27th. If that's the date that you all log as the funds having been expended from you all, then you'd mark June 27th for both of those dates. That'd be totally fine.
Okay, part of my question might be, I think I caught what you said there. And typically for me, when I send, we'll say invoices or payment applications I send them on to the department for payment, I don't necessarily know the exact date that they get physically paid out. I just know my approved date. I suppose I can try requesting, I guess, the detailed transaction log to find out when that check was physically, or the payment was physically made. But so I guess that's the date I'm looking for, is the date that was actually paid on. versus maybe when I got it approved?
Yes, I think that would be ideal. So I'd work with the finance office or finance and business office on a process to confirm that. And I think it may be, we may want to set up a conversation with Josh and team, just because I think there are, similar to you all, I think there are a handful of projects that are sort of live across DNCR, and so we may want to have I think the important thing here is consistency, so that we don't end up with some dates reported a certain way and other expenditures reported a different way. So we may want to just clarify how all that's going to end up getting reported to NC Pro, so that we're clear on exactly how information ends up getting submitted to U.S. Treasury.
Okay, I have a feeling Steve Bass is going to be involved a lot with that, so he's been helping me out a little bit. So not to throw a name out there, but
Yep.
Yeah, thanks.
No problem. All right, any other questions, discussion items? If not, we will wrap up. I'll hang out online here for another few minutes if anything else comes up. But want to thank you all for joining today, and please reach out if you have any remaining questions as we approach the 15th.